Okay, morning everyone. We're going to kick off. So thanks so much for joining us. I'd like to introduce Brandon to my right. And this morning's the start of an exciting series that Icon's kicking off called the MD Forum. It sounds fancier than it is, but the intention is just to hold a series of discussions with like-minded people or leaders in the industry, and really people who are either themselves or part of businesses that are really trying to reshape our industry for the better. People who share our philosophy, and most importantly, people who deeply, deeply believe in the value of what our industry can bring and how it can reshape the futures of South Africans. So this morning is going to be really a discussion between Brandon and I. I'll kick off just to give everyone an introduction to who Icon is, and more importantly, why we exist and what do we believe, and show the relevance, we'll show the link between our philosophy and how it's so perfectly aligned with Capital Legacy. Then Brandon will take you through what he calls the golden thread, and it's really built around the theme of how every good financial plan starts with a will. Or put a different way, a will is the foundation for all great financial plans. And then I'll try and wrap it up. In working with advisors throughout the previous years, particularly in the last 18 months with Capital Legacy, there have been a number of questions that have been asked, and we'll make sure that throughout the conversation we answer those questions, and if we don't, we'll make sure we wrap it up. Again, just a bit of housekeeping. Please, throughout the discussion, send in any questions you might have. I'll either answer them directly or make sure that by the end of the session, we will have addressed them all. So I'm going to kick off.
Great. Morning, everyone.
So why does Icon exist? And really the first thing for us is the most basic insight is that too many people live in constant fear and stress around their financial circumstance. And we want to help people achieve financial freedom. And at this point, I guess that vision sounds very similar to everyone's in the room, including Capital Legacy. And that's the beautiful thing about our industry is so many of us are really trying to achieve the same thing, but we're going about it in different ways, or we're trying to solve different problems collectively. For me as well is that this has become almost we've almost become numb to the reality of this problem. We have accepted that South Africans simply can't retire with financial freedom, and we've almost given up trying to change that. And I don't think the problem is too big to solve. I really believe that in our lifetime, we can make a significant difference to that, and we can actually start changing the statistic. So our mission is to democratize great financial advice and deliver the best value to customers. And immediately here, you can start to see what makes Icon different and how we try and live out our vision. We fundamentally and unashamedly believe that people are better off if they are able to access quality financial advice and quality independent financial advice. So we exist to enable financial advisors to thrive, to enable independence to thrive, and to make sure that more and more South Africans can get quality financial advice. And we want to enable you, the advisors, to give informed holistic advice to your clients, and for your clients to help them get the best possible product fit, the best value for money, and the most effective use of premiums. So what often sounds like a slight contradiction, because Icon really 90% of our conversation is around risk and risk planning. You might sit here and say, well, why do we spend so much time talking about risk planning? But our objective is to get clients to spend less money on risk so that they can allocate more towards savings and investments. And for us, that's not a contradiction. Everything for us is about how do we make risk planning more efficient? How do we make it lean and mean? How do we make sure that we are protecting our clients, but really shifting as much of the spend as possible towards their savings and their wealth creation? And in that same way, that's really what Capital Legacy exists to do, is to rip expenses out, is to make sure that your clients are able to reduce the cost of dying and protect the life cover, protect the insurance, and protect the value of their savings.
Yeah, if I can jump in here, that's exactly what how Capital Legacy came about. Was we realized that people have actually planned in terms of either retirement or to look after the loved ones when they pass away. And what actually happens is people are hit by this unexpected or unforeseen costs when one passes away, and that sort of just totally throws a curveball with regards to what your original plan was from a savings point of view, or what you want to leave behind to your loved ones. And that just kind of puts you on the back foot already from a financial point of view.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the thing that jumps out there is this idea of unexpected costs. I went through that process with a capital legacy specialist 4 or 5 years ago. I would have considered myself a reasonably sophisticated client. I'd been involved in life insurance my whole life. I'd been running a life insurance company. I really believed I understood what was going on. And when I went through this process, I was blown away by the scale of the expenses that would have hit me or hit my dependents at point of death. And those are costs that I never fully understood and absolutely had never catered for in my plan.
And I think also, everyone actually says to me, how has COVID sort of impacted our business? And I actually always say it's impacted the industry in the fact that South Africans have always, as you start off, we've always had to live in a bit of a constant fear because of the different scenarios that just play out. We're a totally unique country where, you can have a riot one week and the next week everything seems to go back to normal in KZN. You can imagine that in the US and the UK, that'd be taking years to sort of just come back from that. And I think we're quite resilient. And because of our resilience, we've created a thing that I call the Superman complex, where we think it's just never going to happen to me. And what COVID's done is actually brought that mortality to the fore, where people have realized, I actually do need to look at the future. I do need to actually have put proper risk cover in place. I do actually have to create wealth, because what if that happens with regards to COVID and I do pass away? What am I leaving behind? And have I put sufficient money aside to look after things such as the cost of winding up your estate when you pass away?
And to take a slight sort of segue, I mean, have you seen the impact of COVID fundamentally change your numbers? How do you think it's affected the behavior? I mean, I hear what you're saying, that it's made us almost confront our mortality and brought some of that to the fore, but how have you seen that in practice?
So it's been quite contradictory in terms of it's from a business point of view, the business has grown tremendously because, mortality has come to the fore and people have realized this is something that they need to actually do in terms of drafting a will. So in that form, we've seen exponential growth. I think just between 2020 and 2021, the business has grown by almost 60%.
Sure.
So I think that's been a real positive, and we've done a lot to educate the public with regards to why it's important to have your will in place and take care of things such as your costs when you pass away. But then on the other side of things, because remember, we're an integrated business, so we're the same business who drafts the will to the same business who winds up the estate. And from a claims point of view and having to wind up estates, we've seen the amount of claims or estates that have come into us increase by 4 times what our level was 18 months ago. So we've got 4 times the amount of estates that are actually coming into the business, which is, first of all, it's quite alarming to see the amount of people that actually pass away and how COVID's really impacted that. But also the pressure that it actually puts on the system. The pressure it puts on having to staff up from a state administrator point of view. The amount of pressure that we need to put on our outside partners, such as the master of the courts, because we need to sort of start getting more estates. And that whole thing is just kind of a snowball effect. And unfortunately, when people come to us with an estate of a loved one who's passed away, they still expect the same kind of service that happened 18 months ago, 2 years ago, where it did take sort of 9 months to wind up an estate. But now, I mean, the whole system's under pressure. The master of the courts is under pressure. It's not just Capital Legacy that's doing more estates, it's the whole industry. So in that respect, as I said, it's quite contradictory. We've seen a big growth in numbers from a new business point of view, but then from an estates point of view, we've also seen a massive growth, which has put the whole system under immense pressure.
I mean, maybe just 2 comments or questions on that, and then we can kind of pick up where we left off. I mean, the first one is 60% growth year on year. You know, this is not a Capital Legacy punt session, but I think that's an amazing success to share. There's so much negativity in the South African market at the moment, and there's so much of a defeatist attitude that we've got problems. It's flat. Where do we find growth? For me, it's just amazing to be sitting with someone who's part of a business that's grown so quickly. Yeah, and it proves that the opportunities are out there. And I'm a firm believer in it's not as simple link as your mindset informs your results, but it's amazing how your worldview changes based on the people you're interacting with. And I think we just need to be better as an industry of sharing some of these success stories.
Yeah. I mean, we were chatting, we had a session with Bruce Whitfield yesterday, and he was giving us some insights with regards to his book that he's just written. And he talks about, I was talking to the 3 founders of the Toerien group, and he was saying, you guys formed this in 1987, which was one of the lowest points in South African history from an economics point of view. I mean, the country was basically bankrupt. There was no money. There was talk of rioting, and no one knew where the country was going. And all of a sudden, they came up with this. They thought, well, let's start a bank in an economy that had no money and where there was actually too many banks at the time. But they saw opportunity there. Same thing in terms of the guys at Capitec, how they saw the opportunity in the early 2000s to take the gap with regards to mass market banking. There's always an opportunity, and you can have 2 choices. You can either say, well, this is the reality, and I'm just going to be pessimistic, or you can say, how do I create an opportunity that's going to uplift people? How am I going to solve their problems? And I think that's what we've tried to do over the last 18 months, especially.
I mean, that actually neatly brings us on to the next slide. And I skipped one reference to you. We can come back there. These are the statistics that both terrify us and also present our greatest opportunity. 6% of South Africans can afford to retire at 65. And for me, this is a stat that no matter how many times I read it, I still get jarred.
Yeah.
But it feels like we have given up. We've become numb to this, and it almost becomes a.
Well, that's the reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and you contradict that with the next one, which says that in the 55 and over age group, South Africans that have life insurance have more than twice as much cover as they need. And that's at an age when your risk cover is its most expensive rand for rand. You now have cover that you don't necessarily need, but you're not going to cancel that because you've been paying for it for so long. And that's money that you're not able to shift towards your savings or retirement, which just kind of exaggerates that first statistic. And then the final one is we are selling over and over to the same people. 75% of sales through the IFA market are sold to the same clients.
Yeah.
And that is something, for me, I look at that as a massive opportunity to shift. Adrian Gore spoke to the Actuarial Society yesterday. And I didn't listen to the whole presentation. I saw a summary, but the thing that really jumped out at me, and he was talking about South African potential and the opportunity that exists. And Discovery as a group started in the 90s.
Yeah.
At a time where every sane-minded person would have said, do not start a business in this country.
Yeah, we had, it was 1992, 1991, 1992. We had just disbanded the ANC, and no one knew where the country was going.
And Discovery is a global success story. You know, whatever your view on their products or their business, they are an absolute, objectively world-class successful business. And there are opportunities. I look at this and I contextualize it with some of the numbers that are out there. In 2020, there was 3.8 billion rand in first-year risk premiums written through the IFAs. So whether that grows at 1% a year or shrinks at 1% a year, that's a big number.
Yeah.
What's more concerning for me is that the bigger number than that is the expense inefficiencies that sit in that space. To write that 3.8 billion, it probably cost the industry 4.5 to 5 billion rand in distribution expenses, and not all of it advisor commission.
Yeah.
Less than half of it.
Yeah.
The rest of it is the expenses that we believe we have an opportunity to fundamentally reshape. And in doing that, the opportunity is to put that money back into our customers' pockets. So we don't have to grow the economy. We don't have to sell one more policy than we're currently selling. But if we can find a better way to do that, our opportunity is to put over 1 billion rand back into South Africans' pockets. And how would that change the 6% statistic?
Yeah, well, that's what I was about to say. If you can do that, as well as what we've been trying to do with reducing costs, winding up the state, it's putting the money back into the hands of either you for retirement or putting the money back in the hands of beneficiaries. And I think that's a firm point there.
Yeah. Look, I mean, and you know, for me, there's 2 things that drive Icon. One is we are trying to shift what constitutes good quality risk advice. What is the industry standard for that? And how do we rebalance portfolios from our over-reliance on lump sum business to income? So that's the first point. The second point is this idea of ripping expenses out, is making things lean and mean. We talk about economies of scale. And the way Icon is going about trying to solve that problem or trying to contribute to that solution is by finding economies of scale in distribution. But it's one of the areas where I think our philosophy is so tightly aligned, because so much of what capital legacy stands for is finding those economies of scale in reducing the cost of dying.
And I think what we from a capital legacy point of view really like with Icon is its objectiveness. It's there to actually solve a problem. It's not there to push a product. And we've got a philosophy here. Obviously, Brad, with your experience from before, is we've always had or I personally have always had a bad feeling towards companies that are doing product comparisons, because the power's in the holder of who's got the pen writing the comparison. You'll never see a product comparison between companies where the person who's sending it out is actually worse off than the person they're comparing against. And that is actually the actual problem is guys are trying to fight for the same 75% of the market, and they're just trying to really outdo each other in terms of which product is slightly better, instead of actually saying, what is the actual problem we're trying to solve for the actual client? And that's why we've taken a firm stance that we don't want to sort of belittle or berate any other company's product. If you look at all the companies are around because they're solving a problem. They actually are really good for the industry. You look at all the insurance companies; they've all made their mark in the market because they're solving problems. So you've got to acknowledge that, and then say, I always say, well, what is our product? Why should a client use our product? We don't need to actually say, why is our product better than someone else's? What is our product doing that's solving the client's problem? And I think that's where we've met, we meet very nicely in a synergy point of view with Icon.
And for me personally, that's been one of the most liberating things to be part of Icon is I've been able to move out of our marketing a product to our marketing a philosophy. And by being product agnostic, it allows us to actually talk about how we can reshape things at an industry level rather than we're fighting for market share. And again, I think it's given us as Icon the space to highlight the strengths of each of the relevant products in the market, because they all have incredible strengths.
Yeah.
And we talk about this best of breed approach, but it's in putting that together that we think in combination, you can actually create a solution that you simply couldn't create on its own or separately. So let me sort of wrap up probably my longest intro ever and just quickly explain in 1 minute where Icon sits, what we're trying to do, and then how that flows into the capital solution, a capital legacy solution. So what Icon is really trying to do is flip the outdated broker consultant model on its head. And that sounds critical, and it isn't intended to be totally critical. And it's not saying that the broker consultant needs to disappear. What we are saying is that we think there are some fundamental challenges to this model, and its inefficiencies create often the wrong behavior. So firstly, the challenge of this model is that broker consultants are employed and controlled by the product providers they represent. As a consequence, they end up being product pushers, and they're forced to be product pushers by design. And that means as much as many of them want to partner with advisors, want to actually be part of building practices and creating solutions, at the end of the day, they make their money by convincing you to sell their product and someone else's.
Yeah.
And that creates some of this behavior we're talking about. I mean, to the point you made earlier, all the product information that the independent advisor is getting is sponsored and paid for by the product providers.
Yeah.
And at best, that's inherently biased. Often, I think it's fundamentally dishonest. But it does mean that the advisor is sitting there overwhelmed by noise, overwhelmed by product information that's coming at them from all angles, broker consultants that want to see them every single week. How do they find the time to actually deliver quality advice to their clients? How do they have the independence and access to the right information to make those product recommendations with the peace of mind of knowing that it's right? And how do we take the fear out of the process, the fear of risk advice? And how do we create a replicable, defensible advice process that allows an advisor to deliver risk advice with peace of mind? And that's really what Icon is trying to do. We want to come in and we want to reinvent that space in between. We're not trying to change the industry. We're not trying to change advisors. In fact, we are trying to be there to enable advisors to continue doing what they're doing, but do what they're best at. We're not trying to become a product provider. In fact, what we're trying to do is create the environment for product providers to thrive and focus on what they should be doing best. And the way we're trying to do this is by coming in and creating a marketplace for financial services products, creating a central point of contact for advisors. And really, there's 4 parts to that offering. One is a fundamental saving of time. If you're working with Icon and we can truly be your risk partner, You've got one point of contact instead of multiple broker consultants. The other thing for us is through our risk guidance philosophy, we're developing a framework for what constitutes a replicable, defensible advice process. The third one is because we have independence, we believe that our independent product analysis is going to give you as an advisor the information to make those product recommendations to your clients. And the fourth one, which I think is often the one that's probably not understood the value of the power of enough, is our ability to craft a best of breed solution. So we are very careful and very particular about the product providers that we bring into our world. And we introduce product providers into the icon space when we believe they strengthen our broader offering. And that gives us the opportunity to actually create a solution for the advisor and for the client that may well be a combination of the product providers we recommend. And from a product provider point of view, it means you're sitting there saying that the result is now no longer binary. It's not about winning the case or losing the case.
Yeah.
In fact, you could be part of every single solution to a client in the area where you are particularly strong. And again, for us, that's why we're so proud to be partnering with Capital Legacy, because in Capital Legacy space, you are experts, you are specialists, and you will always be part of that solution for us. So that's the Icon story. And I guess by now, I've tried to explain why Icon and Capital Legacy want to work together. There's this idea of economies of scale, idea of bringing down inefficiencies and costs in the broader industry. This idea of partnering with specialists and people who really focus on doing one thing exceptionally well. And this idea that all good financial plans at their heart need to have a will in place.
100%.
Which really brings me into handing over to Brandon for a few minutes to talk about what Capital Legacy call the golden thread.
Cool. Thanks, Brad. So yeah, if we actually look at, if we take a step back, in terms of what we've often discussed in terms of the golden thread. So if you look at our financial planning, if you go to Financial Planning School 101 and actually say, how does financial planning work? So financial planning all obviously starts off, everyone always says, if you go for your day one as a financial planner, they say you should draft the client's will as the first step. From there, you move on to things like retirement planning, because now you've got to plan on a person's savings and retirement. Then the third part is estate planning. So what actually happens when I pass away, who's going to look after my family and the beneficiaries? The fourth step that we've often said is when you pass away, as I always say, you hold thumbs that the product provider will pay out the policies. And then from there, the final step is to then wind up the estate and take care of the beneficiaries. And that's what I always talk about when I talk about the golden thread. It's those steps. And that is in a perfect world for financial advising 101. And what we've seen for many years is financial advisors have kind of, if I can put it on the screen, really kind of played in that middle part. So from retirement planning all the way to the payment of benefits once the client passes away. And they've kind of always missed that beginning part, which is drafting the will, and then obviously winding up the estate and looking after the beneficiaries. And there's many reasons for it. Guys were not really a fay with how to draft a will. They're a bit worried that if they start talking about the will and the client asks them a question, it's going to impact the potential sale of them with regards to their investments and risk planning. And then obviously winding up the estate, it's quite a complicated process. And they've always thought that they could go to a lawyer or a bank or a traditional fiduciary company. So the guys have always played traditionally in that. And then when we started Capital Legacy, we said, no, if you're going to be involved in financial planning, we need to start from the beginning of drafting the will and wind up the estate. But how do we help the advisor? How do we make that process a lot simpler and easier? And I think that's where we've definitely played our part, where we said we've connected all those dots so that now you can actually, as you said, have a client solution from the start, which is drafting the will, all the way through your retirement estate planning, through obviously winding up, getting the benefits paid out in terms of the policies, and then assisting with winding up the estate and making sure the beneficiaries are taken care of. And I think the journey that we've done with the advisor speaks to that. And the reason it speaks to that is we have a thing called, or our philosophy is integration. So if you look at traditionally why advisors have not done it before, in terms of drafting the will to start off their financial plan, it's because they've had to go through another they had to go through one company for that. Then they've had to go through another company to do the retirement or the risk planning. And then once all the policies are paid out, have to wind up their estate. Then you have to go to another institution, whether it being a bank or whatever. It just doesn't make sense. Speaking to your talk earlier, economies of scale, you're just causing more costs because this company's got to make their margin from the will. Then obviously the product provider has to make it from the insurance policies. And then obviously the executor has to make it from when they wind up their estate. It just didn't speak. It just didn't have that link. And that's why I talk about the golden thread. And we can do that golden thread because we're an integrated business. We are the company that's going to draft the will for you. We're the company that is going to wind up the estate for you and look after you, or look after the costs that may occur once we start that estate. I'll get to the costs later. And then we're still that company that looks after the beneficiaries once the whole estate's been wound up, and we do that through various ways, through various trusts, etc. And for me, that is proper financial planning. If you're going to call yourself a financial advisor, you need to have from the start all the way through to the end. And I think a big reason that advisors have used us is this integration process. It's the one company that they're dealing with. They can start off with the will. When you're winding up the estate, we've taken into account all the financial planning that you've done. And then we're the company that will wind up the estate and look after the beneficiaries. And that's why we call it actually the golden thread.
So maybe just take a step back and less about Capital Legacy and more about your view on the industry. I suppose one of my concerns about where some of the regulation is going is that we are creating almost an impossible situation for advisors. We're putting more and more responsibilities and burdens on them, which is forcing advisors to say, well, actually, if you're going to meet these regulations, you need to be an expert across so many different areas. And the consequence of that is adding cost, time, et cetera, et cetera. Yet at the same time, you're expected to have face-to-face relationships, regular reviews with your clients. How is that, I suppose, sustainable without one of the alternatives being, as an advisor, I'm only going to focus on high-end clients, or I'm simply not able to deliver a full service offering to my clients? So what I'm seeing a lot of is advisors now either moving away from risk advice because they're focusing on investment only, because the consequences of being a kind of a one-stop shop is almost impossible. Or I'm really reducing the number of clients I'm working with, and only some of them are going to get quality advice. And that has to be an unintended consequence. That can't be what the regulator had in mind.
No.
So what can we, as people who care about the industry and have a like-minded view, and I think share the view that we believe people are better off when a quality independent advisor is able to survive and thrive?
Yeah, so I mean, we've built our business on the independent financial advisor. Everyone talks about in this day and age about people go and, especially with the next generation, guys go and search for solutions themselves, and they will obviously go on and Google or go on the internet and look for a solution themselves. And I think I question that and say that people might go and search for information, but they're not actually going to go do it themselves. So in the old days where you used to go to your financial advisor as the expert and they would actually tell you what to do and you'd just sign and do it and you'd go ahead and move on with your life. People do research now, but they still want that financial advisor because people don't know what they don't know. So they might research it, but they need someone to actually push them to actually get it done. So that's the first point. Getting back to the legislation point of view, totally agree with you in terms of where legislation is going and in terms of it being a lot more stricter. We actually had a case probably, I think it was in 2020 or 2021, where an actual financial advisor was taken to the ombudsman for not actually putting a will in place or offering to have a will in place for a client. Now, that had never been done before, someone everyone would say, have you had a will done? No. Okay, it's fine. Why don't your financial advisor do it? I don't do wills. Okay. But now he actually got taken to the ombudsman and actually found to be negligent that he didn't actually offer a will to the actual client when going through their reviews and taking them on as a client. And I think that is one of the unintended consequences now with legislation, is that you've got to be a jack of all trades. And where I actually see it going is the independent financial advisor is going to have to start partnering with experts within the different sort of divisions of financial planning, if you can call it that. So partnering with, for instance, a fiduciary company from a will's perspective and helping you wind up the estate. And I think the financial advisor has to learn that you're not letting go of the client. The client is still yours, but now you're becoming more of a relationship manager of the actual client. You're managing the relationship of putting a financial plan in place, whether that's bringing an expert in to do the will, or you bring in an expert in to come and help you with the risk. You actually become more of a relationship manager to a client. And that's where I see the independent financial advisor going, is being this relationship manager where you're pushing and pulling different experts to make sure that the client's got the best possible solution. And that's what we chatted before about with Icon being independent, is you're not pushing a product. You're not becoming a product salesman. You're saying, what is the solution for the client? And I think that's where we'd like to see a financial advisor go from a relationship management point of view, is you're providing a solution. That solution is you need to have a will. Great, I'm going to pull in this expert. You need to look after in terms of risk cover. Great, this is the best partner that we think you should go with. This is how you should be doing your retirement planning. Great, this is the partner I think you should be going with. And I think that's where I think ultimately the financial advisor will get to, based on the amount of legislation and what can go wrong, and to kind of protect yourself.
So, I mean, again, I referred to it earlier, just in working with advisors, particularly in the last 18 months and working with Capital AC, the number of questions that have been asked.
Yeah.
And broadly, they fall under sort of one of the next three categories. The first one is just, how is my client better off? And how is my relationship with my client still protected?
So I think when we, if we look at why all good, as I would say, all good financial planning should start with the will. First of all, it's going to smooth the administration process of the client's estate. Being executors and taking on an estate where the client has passed away interstate, in other words, they haven't got a will drawn up, the delays and the costs and the hassle of actually trying to wind up the estate is not just costly, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating for the family. Think about it, they've just gone through a real traumatic experience, and now there's something else that's going to cause frustration and delays when all they want to is really finality. So making sure that you actually have got a will in place that once you pass away, it makes this administration of the client's estate smoother, is fundamental to actually starting off your financial planning with a will. Us again being integrated, we are the guys who drafted the will. We're the guys going to be executing that will from an executive point of view. So it's that whole integration process that I talked about. In terms of the costs, and this is a big one, I mean, this is where we sort of very proud to say we kind of changed an industry. So if you look at the way financial advisors have always been sort of doing the financial planning, sort of up until a decade ago, is you always looked at, when I pass away, what does my family need to live or move on? And guys have always done their big sort of lump sum life cover amounts. And then they've obviously put in place things for estate duty. Okay, so we need all your inheritance taxes, so estate duty, CGT, and things like that. But the real big costs that people have not ever understood or planned for is what we've called the real cost of dying, and that's winding up the estate. And there's many costs, but the three big main costs that actually sort of affect an estate is your executive fees.
Yep.
It's your testamentary trust fees if you've got minors under the age of 18 and you need to obviously set up a trust for them, and conveyancing fees. In terms of if there's property and the property has to move out of the deceased's name and has to go into another person, you know, there's a cost in doing that. I always joke with everyone and I always say, you know, what happens when you pass away? The house, let's go for a simple example, is held 50% by the husband, 50% by the wife in their name. What actually happens when the husband passes away? Well, my wife will take it over. Okay, but how's it going to go into her name 100%? Oh, yes. Yeah, you got to go to an attorney who's going to move that 50% to make sure that your wife is 100% owner of the property. And I don't know about you, Brad, but there's not too many attorneys I know who work for free. And there's a cost to that. And these are the costs that people were not seeing or not planning for, or they didn't realize the impact. You know, you've looked at fiduciary companies in the past and they always say, well, there's a 3% executive fee on your estate. And 3% doesn't seem a lot. But when you actually start putting that into a rand value, and then you actually have to start telling a widow that this is actually the cost to actually wind up your husband's estate. That's when it becomes real. And what we've done, obviously, with Capital Legacy is through our unique legacy protection plan, where you indemnify yourself from those costs. So when you do the will with us, we actually, by treating the customers fairly, we actually show you what those costs would be if you were to pass away tomorrow. By doing that, usually people get quite the fright of their lives. They actually see the rand value of this 3% and what a testamentary trust costs to administer. And we actually offer them a solution, which is a legacy protection plan. And what this does, it actually indemnifies you for those costs I just spoke about, so that when you pass away, we are the company who's going to administer it. We wind up the estate. Those costs are taken care of because we obviously use the protection plan to pay for those costs. And it just makes the whole process a lot smoother.
So maybe just a quick breakdown of those costs, because I remember this being one of the most eye-opening moments for me. So the executor, I think most of us know somewhere in the back of our mind there's an executor cost somewhere.
Yeah. And
you're right, where everyone throws around the 3%, and the percentage is a percentage until you turn it into rand value. And that's when you go, wait, that's R1 million. That's a lot of money. But I remember, I think it was you who made the point to me that actually it costs the same to wind up R1 million estate as it does to wind up a 20 million rand estate. So why are we charging these things as a percentage?
Yeah.
And I think that's the first area where you try to bring some economies of scale to this.
Yeah.
The second thing is around the testamentary trust and the conveyancing fees. I mean, most people when they die, a large part of the estate is going to be a property. It's for most of us the largest asset.
Yeah, it's the largest asset you have, yeah.
And again, conveyancing costs are typically something that we forget about or we ignore. Similarly, most people are actually planning death around looking after their children.
Yeah.
And there, a testamentary trust becomes almost a non-negotiable, and those bring significant costs. So when I went through this for myself, and I thought my stuff was pretty much in order, I remember these costs coming to somewhere between 5 to 10% of the value of my estate. Now, a 10 million rand estate, that's 2 million rand. Now, all of a sudden, you're leaving behind 8 million instead of 10 million. That's a game changer.
100%. And you sat with your financial advisor and said, I need 10 million rand, and that's why you put that in place. But you realized, as you said, it actually is not 10 million, it's 8 or 8.5 million, which is a significant impact on the family and the beneficiaries. I mean, just to go back to our earlier point is we talked about in terms of investments and what one needs to look after the family when they go or when they pass away. And getting back to testament trust, so yes, executive fees is one cost. You do that 3%. But then you look at a testamentary trust. So you say, I've got kids under the age of 18 and I need the money to go into testamentary trust to look after them. Now, that testamentary trust, let's use your example, it's 10 million. You're going to put 10 million into that testamentary trust. Generally, there's to set up a trust, if you actually look around the market, generally there's anywhere between 0.5 and 1% cost just to set up the trust. And then you're looking at the standard, if you look again across the industry, probably 0.75% per annum on those assets within the trust that it actually costs. Now, everyone who's trying to get an alpha in terms of value on investments, you're already hit to the 0.75 every year as that grows. So you as an advisor, if you're administering the testamentary trust, you actually have to get quite a higher alpha just to actually negate those administration costs. And that's what guys don't think about when they say, oh, I'll just put the money into a trust. And that's again where our legacy protection plan, for the duration of the trust, you're indemnified of those fees, you're indemnified of those costs. Getting back to your first point that you made, that was something that we actually looked at when we were building the legacy protection plan. It's generally the same amount of work to wind up a 1 million rand estate as to wind up a 20 million estate. But the 3% and 1 million and 20 million is vastly different, okay, in terms of a cost. But it's generally the same work. You're still filling in the same forms. You're still closing the same DSTV accounts. You're still phoning the same bank and closing the same bank accounts. Why is there such that big difference? And what the legacy protection plan does is we actually take into account what is it to indemnify the cost of administration. And that's where it is a lot economically viable, where you take out the legacy protection plan that just indemnifies you from those three big costs that we discussed. And then in terms of, I touched on there in terms of trusts, and I think there's a slide later where I'll just talk about demystifying trusts. Guys, I think, get a bit scared about trusts. It sounds complicated, it sounds expensive, and people don't really understand how it works. And I'm going to touch on just now in terms of the way that we've tried to demystify how complicated trust can be and how trusts have generally been misused when doing sort of financial planning. And it's something that we really push for while we're doing the will, and how we set up special purpose vehicle trusts for a special purpose, which I think we're going to touch on it later.
So maybe just for my understanding, just pull out a little bit at a sort of a macro view of the industry. What we're saying is there are a couple of problems here.
Yeah.
And Capital Legacy happen to believe you're perfectly placed to solve some of those problems. That's almost incidental. The first problem is that still 75% of people are dying without a will.
Yeah.
And that creates untold complications later. The second problem is that the cost of dying is way more than people realize, firstly, and way more than it should be, secondly.
Yeah.
And I think those are two equally important points. There's a cost that I think most people don't take account of. But secondly, there is actually a better way to do it.
Yeah.
There is a much more efficient way of managing it.
And
then the third one, is what is the most effective way to plan for that? And so you guys have developed an LPP product, which is a solution. As an advisor, it's not the only solution.
No.
I could equally use your calculator. I could equally work out the cost of dying and provide for that cost through other mechanisms. So I'll give you a chance in a second to explain why you believe LPP is optimal for that. But what I was just trying to get out here is these are industry-wide problems.
Yeah.
That we are having a go at trying to find solutions to.
And I think the industry is moving. We always say that we're not the sort of only show in town kind of thing, because many of the financial advising companies have actually moved towards what we've kind of created. And I think where they saw it was, if you look at a traditional fiduciary company in the past, if you think about it, what did they actually want you to do? Well, they want you to do a will where they probably charge your fee to draft the will. They want you to pass away as soon as possible so that they could actually start winding up the estate, and they charge you the max amount that they could.
Yeah.
From a treating customer fairly or moral point of view, it doesn't seem right. And that's where we changed the industry on the head, where we said, we'll do the will for you. We will then offer you a possible solution with a legacy protection plan, where we actually want you to live as long as possible. But if you do pass away, we're there to actually wind up the estate for you. And I think that's where the industry is kind of moving to. And I think, and it's changing. What you said was an industry problem with regards to make sure wills are done in financial planning, and how do we take care of these costs.
So we've got 10 to 15 minutes left. I'm going to try and move through a couple of slides fairly quickly and then give us both a chance to wrap up. Cool. I mean, the follow-on question to how's my client better off is what's in it for me, the advice, which is probably the easiest thing to answer. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a go at that, and then we can close it up.
Okay, great. If we actually look at what's in it for the financial advisor, okay, so stay on top of your fiduciary duty without the hassle. So as I said to you before, I think financial advisors are going to become more relationship manager types. And this is one part that you can actually say, I partner with a company called Capital Legacy. They're the experts when it comes to making sure that your will's in place, and then you know who's going to be winding up the estate. So we can actually help you with that and take that hassle away from you while you're doing the rest of the financial planning. In terms of elevate your advisor value prop, it's I always joke with financial advisor is, I think we've all got the call where you get a call saying, hi, can I come and do an F&A? Can I come and see you? Even if it's for your review, I need to come and see you for your review. We've kind of given a new angle to it to say, can I come and talk to you about your will? Can we come and update your will? And what we found with clients is clients seem to be a lot more, if I can use the word, sticky in terms of staying with their financial advisor when their financial advisors wanted to the will or was in control of the will. And because I always joke and always say people often lie on their F&A, but they'll never lie on their will. And they sort of know as soon as that financial advisor is in control of their will, it makes the client a sticky client, and they feel that you're really looking after them. Create better value in your practice. Again, let's be realistic. Why did financial advisors not do wills in the past? Well, there's nothing in it for them from a financial point of view. And what we've kind of created now is say, partner with us. We are the experts, but we're partnering with you, and for that you should be remunerated for that. So we actually we have a referral commission that we pay. Fee sharing. So this is a big one that we've obviously pushed for a lot in terms of fee sharing. So when a client obviously passes away, there's obviously in the past, there was a share of an executive fee. But remember, there's no executive fee now because we indemnify those costs. So what we've actually got is we've got a fee sharing commission structure where we actually pay you a fee when your client passes away while we do the administration. Why that is very important is because those fees, we call it book value. That the amount of clients that you actually put on your book, think about it, that fee share is growing. So for instance, if you're on our gold plan where the fee sharing is sort of 50,000 Rand when the client passes away, and you have 10 clients on gold, that's 500,000 Rand that's attributable to you. And what we've seen is we've actually seen advisors put that on their balance sheet as part of what their practice is worth, because your client is going to pass away and those are fees that are owed to you. So you're actually growing your practice at the same time from a value point of view by having this fee sharing. Something that, Brad, we've often chatted about in terms of new risk opportunities.
Yeah.
So what's quite nice is we work on a model of you refer, we fulfill. So you obviously refer the client to us, and one of our consultants goes out and drafts the will and offers the optional legacy protection plan. But many advisors have said to us, "Oh, but it's my client, aren't you taking my client?" We are there, remember, on behalf of you. Everything, all communication to all clients is always on behalf. And what we've done successfully is we're there to do one thing. We're there to advise on the will, the legacy protection plan. But what comes out of that is many opportunities. As I said, people don't lie on their will. And we've often seen that there's many opportunities that are created out of the will drafting. We pass on those opportunities to the financial advisor. And financial advisors have been able to create more business just based on us going to do the will. So we've created opportunities there. And then lastly, new investment opportunities. What happens when an estate comes in and there's assets to be reinvested? We are not an asset management house and are never going to be an asset management house. We know where our strengths lie. And what we do is if there's assets to be reinvested, we call the original financial advisor in, who obviously was the referrer with the will. And we obviously say to the financial advisor, these are the assets available. Would you like to reinvest them? What's your we let them look after the family and invest those assets. So we've created opportunities from a risk point of view and obviously from an investment point of view when the client passes away. The client's not ours. Remember, we're there on behalf of the advisor. And I think that's a point that I always want to take across.
Yeah, and I think that is the most common concern or question raised by advisors. And it's not about capital legacy, it's about outsourcing or partnering with anyone in general. Is, am I able to do that and still protect my relationship with my client? And the answer is yes, if you're working with the right partner. And that has to be the most important question I think any advisor has to have comfort with before they decide to work with anyone. And it's important that in doing this, I fundamentally believe that this strengthens the relationship with the client. And I'll give you an example. I was working with an advisor a year ago who had acquired a client base. He was sitting on 250 people that he actually hadn't really even met yet. Now, how is he meaningfully going to set up meetings with 250 people, get to know them well enough so that he can actually give them advice? Well, one of the things he tried is to say, well, I'm going to start with the will. I'm going to effectively outsource that information, getting to know you process to a capital legacy specialist. Over the period of time, I had 250 clients. We had 250 clients and I had a will in place, but he also had up-to-date, accurate information about them to then go have meaningful conversations.
100%.
So that, I think this process is much deeper than a will. It's actually around getting quality, up-to-date information.
And I think what will differentiate you as a financial advisor going into the future is the quality of the advice you give. And I mean, I know it sounds basic, but instead of doing product pushing, it's solving a solution. It's solving a problem with a solution. And that's why I've said that I think financial advisors are going to move more into space of being a relationship manager and providing the solution. For an example, outsourcing the fiduciary part from a will and winding up the estate, partnering with Icon, who can give a proper independent solution with regards to risk and investment. The clients are going to be thinking to themselves later on, oh, well, my advisor was doing a product push because they support X company. No, they're actually providing a solution for a problem that's arisen.
Look, we could keep chatting for hours, and we probably would, but we've got 5 minutes left. So I'm going to try and, when is the right time to chat about it? Well, we can skip through this fairly quickly, because I guess the short answer is now. And really it's around almost at any stage of your client relationship is an opportunity to have this discussion.
Yeah, in one sentence, as soon as there's any sort of life-changing event, such as having a baby, getting married, acquiring new property, but I always tell financial advisors, like, you go do a review once a year, review the client's will once a year.
And I mean, you talked about COVID at the beginning. You know, it's brought a fear to us. It's changed the way we think about stuff. But I think as importantly, most people wouldn't have gone through 2020 without being affected in some way, either health or change in employment or change in family setup. We were changed in ways through COVID that, you know, almost we didn't expect.
Yeah.
And any change necessitates this kind of conversation. The final or sort of penultimate slide is really just wrapping up some of the things we've been talking about. Is that one of the changes in the industry we are trying to drive is this idea of moving an annual review from a necessary evil to actually something that's valuable and a fundamental part of an advisor's annual plan. And, you know, we talk a lot about the fact that we want to rebalance portfolios. We want to reshape the industry. If we can build a thorough, well thought through review process into every advisor's practice, it means the entire industry is 12 months away from changing. And that's our drive. And part of that is making sure that that annual review process starts with having a will and an estate plan in place. So if I was to try and wrap up some of our conversations now, and move it from, I hope we've both had an opportunity to explain what Icon does and what Capital Legacy does, but what should be coming through clearly is that we believe as our businesses, we have some solutions. But whether you choose to work with us or not, there are problems that need to be solved.
Yeah.
And I think the first problem is it, much as it's not acceptable that 6% of people are able to retire, it's equally not acceptable that nearly 80% of South Africans die without work. That is a fundamental change that we need to make.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I think we both share the view that the industry and customers are better off when independent advisors are able to thrive and do their job well. And there are regulations coming through that are having unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And some of those unintended consequences is that it's forcing advisors to be jack of all trades. And how are you able to be an expert across investment, across risk, across fiduciary, across all of these other things, as well as perform the relationship building and servicing functions that are expected of you?
Yeah.
I see one of two options. Either you narrow your focus and you aren't all things to your client and there are risks attached to that.
Yeah.
Or you have to make a decision that you're prepared to partner with experts. And I think partnering with appropriate experts has to be one of the trends that we see happening. And then the third thing is that we want independent advisors to be able to shift from being only commission-driven at point of sale to actually being solution-focused, partnership-focused. And that's one of the things I really like about what Capital Legacy is trying to do is we talk about it as fee-generating and make it sound like there's money there. But it's actually the way that money is created. It's actually creating a sustainable practice value. And it's making the role of an advisor a sustainable business.
I think what it's done is it's in terms of just doing a sale for commission, it's created a stream of opportunities to create to create a thing called a commission, or to create opportunities to gain financial sort of financial backing, and that's through you have an opportunity. So yes, obviously there's a referral fee from the will, but then you've created an opportunity because you've done the will. You can see other opportunities to do risk planning, which kind of just creates a whole bigger pie for you to actually share in.
And a virtuous cycle.
100%.
And then I suppose the final point is around inefficiencies that exist in our industry. And one of the things that Icon believes is that there's inefficiencies in the cost of distribution. Obviously, the reason that a Capital Legacy exists is there's inefficiencies in the cost of dying. And those are expenses that we believe people are probably not fully aware of, and their expenses are way more than they need to be. And in trying to solve both of those problems, you've also developed a product called Legacy Protector Plan that indemnify you against those costs, which is another option that advisors now have in their quiver of arrows, if I've used the right analogy there. So yeah, I don't know if you have any other closing comments, but from my side, I mean, it's been fun to chat to you. I hope this is the start of a longer conversation.
Yeah, I mean, from our point of view, it's great. I mean, I wish we actually had more time. I think me and you could spend hours chatting about the industry. But as I said, I think to wrap up, just to echo what you said, I think financial advisors we see a trend of being independent. What does independence mean? Independence actually means it's not that you've got an array of product providers that you support. It actually just means that you are actually the person who looks after the client and controls the financial plan of the client. And I really see them becoming more relationship managers, as I keep saying, and being able to partner with experts that can actually make sure that the solution you provide a client is the correct solution. It's not just a product that's being pushed.
Yeah, I think the days of being a one-person solution and not being able to offer every single thing to a client are gone.
Yeah.
And as a consequence of that, we have to find a way in our industry where we're able to partner with experts. And again, I mean, my final comment is one of the problems that we have not, I think, made meaningful progress in solving is reducing the number of people who die without a valid will in place.
Yeah. So that's our mission, and we're going to carry on pushing for that.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for sharing. And these conversations are not meant to live or die in the hour we spend online. The real value for this is how we share it afterwards, how we start conversations, and how we interact with each other. So please share share any comments, engage with Brandon or myself on LinkedIn, and we'd love to work with you together to really continue to improve our industry.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.